Title: The 130,000 Virgil Wasteland. Why no one will sleep in China. Higgis Pence visual. Fast-paced, high-contrast brawl of Shanghai, ultra-luxury waterfront skyline from a drone. The camera swoops past a gleaming, impossibly slender glass tower top piercing the smog. Text flashes on screen. The 350-meter ghost tower splash sound effect. Narrator. The most expensive apartment in the Jade Emperor Tower has never been slept in. Not for one single night. A tech billionaire from Shenzhen paid a staggering 620 million yuan, nearly 87.7 million US dollars, for the absolute crown of this high-rise mega project, a massive 6-bedroom penthouse on the 88th floor, featuring a custom open-air viewing terrace a quarter-mile up in the sky. According to public records from his own asset managers, he has never spent an evening there. Instead, he has spent the last 3 years doing something far more desperate, trying to get out. Visual. Cut to animated finances chart. A graph showing a steep, drop-down curve with an Exxon-style red line plummeting. He listed the penthouse for a record-breaking 1.2 billion yuan. Then, as panic set in, he pulled it. He relisted it at 920 million yuan. Then he slashed the price again, down near 700 million yuan. With his new broker publicly admitting that the original valuation was completely indefensible. The man who bought the absolute peak of China's ultra-luxury residential market has been trying to hand the keys to anyone else, almost since the day the local municipal construction commission signed off on the occupancy permit. And inside this tower, he is not the exception. He is the blueprint. This is the construction files, and this is document number 10 visual. Text flashes. Document 10, the Rizal Exodus. A digital file fodder stamped with confidential popping open. In our last investigation, we exposed the paper trail behind the massive fraud allegations at the Jade Emperor Tower in Shanghai's premium Riverside district. We unmasked what the developers reportedly knew about structural flexing, while 20 billion yuan worth of ultra-high-end apartments were being marketed to the country's elite. Today, we follow the cash in the opposite direction, straight out the door, because the buyers who capitalized this vertical empire, the hedge fund titans, the manufacturing tycoons, the retail magnates who can afford anything, are doing the one thing that no state-of-the-art marketing campaign can spin. They are selling, some at half price, some at catastrophic losses, and in the strangest twist in this entire engineering saga, even one of the billionaire consortium partners who financed the tower is currently being pushed out of his own private units inside it. Let's start with the hard ledger, because the phrase cursed building is an opinion, but a certified closing price recorded by the local housing bureau is an undeniable fact. Visual. Sound of a gavel slamming. The screen transition to a stylized Excel spreadsheet with red cells highlighted. Exhibit 1. The Penthouse, Unit 88. Purchased in 2018 for 620 million yuan. At the time, it stood as the priciest residential asset transaction in the city's modern history, shattering records at over 75,000 yuan per square meter. Fast forward to recent quarters, years on the market, 3 elite international brokerages cycled through, and the highest private residence in the East still cannot find a single buyer at anywhere near its dream price. Exhibit 2. And this is the true body blow to the market. The 65th floor, a massive 750 square meter residence completely customized by an award-winning Kyoto interior designer, finished with hand-carved weathered stones and ancient timber accents. It was originally listed on premium international portals for 950 million yuan. 2 years of absolute silence later, it closed at just 460 million yuan. That is less than half the original asking price. Visual. Zoom in on the numbers, retracting by 50%. A red alert siren flashed lightly in the corner. But here is the detail that should stop every high-rise real estate investor dead in their tracks. That final closing price was almost exactly what the seller paid for the raw unit back during the pre-sale phase years ago. Think about that math. Years of holding one of the most prestigious vertical addresses on Earth. Years of astronomical carrying costs, property management fees, local luxury taxes, and special maintenance levies on a trophy asset, only to achieve a round trip to zero appreciation in a decade where prime coastal luxury real estate skyrocketed. Exhibit 3. Lower down the shaft, smaller money, identical direction. A 50th floor unit purchased for 150 million yuan was listed at 125 million yuan, already deeply underwater, and was recently chopped further to 105 million yuan. These ultra-wealthy owners aren't negotiating for profit anymore. They are negotiating the precise diameter of their financial exit wound. When ultra-high net worth sellers separated by 30 floors in structural height are all running the exact same play, get out, take the hit, cut the cord, that is no longer an isolated case of personal circumstance. That is a collective market verdict on the structural integrity of the tower itself. So, what are China's elites running from? If you have been tracking this investigative series, you already know the engineering case file. The massive plumbing blowouts from high-pressure water risers that flooded multiple luxury sublevels. The automated express elevators that repeatedly lock up and trap executives because the tower's slender concrete frame flexes too violently in high winds, creating friction along the guide rails. The persistent structural groaning and metallic popping sounds during coastal storms, noises that residents have described in formal complaints to the Municipal Housing Bureau as completely intolerable. The markets don't wait for a structural collapse before they react. They price in fear the exact second the engineering reports leak. And the resale ledger we just read is precisely what structural panic looks like when translated into hard currency. The billionaires are not fleeing a ghost. They are fleeing a compromised balance sheet. And as the wind speeds pick up over the delta, the true structural test is only just beginning. Visual. Architectural drawings of a super sledder tower appear on screen. A digital caliper measures the width against the height. Animated mathematical equations overlay the blueprint. Narrator. To understand why the Jade Emperor Tower is hemorrhaging value, we have to look past the gold leaf lobbies and dive directly into the structural blueprints. This isn't just a story about real estate speculation. It is a story about physics pushing a megastructure to its absolute engineering limits. And the paper trail left behind at the Shanghai Municipal Construction Commission tells a terrifying story of a design that was fundamentally volatile from day one. Let's look at the core metric that dictates the life of every modern super-tall skyscraper, the slenderness ratio. Visual. The animation isolates the concrete core of the tower, showing a side profile. A Kyle shows 115 RAW in bold red text. For standard high-rise residential projects throughout eastern China, structural engineers generally maintain a height-to-width ratio of about 1:7 or 1:8. This ensures structural rigidity and limits lateral sway during typhoons or seismic shifts along the coastal fault lines. But the developers of the Jade Emperor Tower wanted something unprecedented. They demanded maximum height on an incredibly tight urban plot along the riverfront. The structural engineers pushed the envelope to a mind-bending 1:15 ratio. The tower is a 350-meter concrete needle. And when you build that high with a profile that thin, you enter a dangerous aerodynamic battlefield known as vortex shedding. When high-velocity coastal winds hit a perfectly square or monolithic tower, the air cannot pass smoothly. Instead, it breaks apart, creating alternating low-pressure whirlpools, or vortices, on opposite sides of the structure. These vortices literally suck the building from side to side. At 300 meters in the air, if your building doesn't have the right aerodynamic mitigations, vortex shedding will cause the upper floors to whip back and forth, like a bamboo reed in a storm. Visual. Excuse. Computer simulation. B-roll, shewing wind flowing around a square tower, creating turbulent red and blue swirls on the leeward side. To combat this, the engineering team at the China Academy of Building Research initially recommended massive structural wind slots, entire open floors left completely empty every 20 stories to allow the wind to pass clean through the tower. But every square meter of open space meant millions of dollars in lost penthouse revenue for the development consortium, led by Chairman Wang and his enterprise partners. A compromise was struck. The open wind slots were minimized, and the structural mass was reinforced with high-strength, steel-reinforced concrete. Between 2016 and 2019, the pouring of that concrete became a race against the clock. Over 180,000 cubic meters of specialized grade 60 concrete were pumped up the central core, floor by floor, month after month, under punishing deadlines. But the timestamps on the concrete core inspection logs, which we recovered from public construction archives, reveal deep inconsistencies in the curing cycles. Visual timeline graph appears on screen. Specific dates and hours flash rapidly. Oxy 2017, Nov 2017. The text on screen highlights accelerated curing and soil settlement detected 12 millimeters. According to internal quality control reports from the local Housing Bureau's engineering audit during the wet autumn of 2017, multiple concrete pours on the 40th through 45th floors were subjected to accelerated chemical curing agents to keep the project on schedule. The problem? When you force concrete to dry too quickly in a high-humidity coastal environment, you risk microfissuring within the structural matrix. And then came the ground data, the weight of 180,000 cubic meters of concrete, concentrated onto a highly compact footprint, began to push down on the soft alluvial soil of the Yangtze River Delta. In early 2018, deep-level sensor readouts tracking foundation pile stability registered an unexpected differential settlement of 14 millimeters between the eastern and western edges of the foundation pad. 14 millimeters might sound like nothing when you're ending on the street. But when you project a 14 millimeter tilt at the base up through a 350-meter structural vertical, that slight deviation translates into an agonizing lateral lean at the top of the tower. Visual telephoto lens footage looking up at the edge of the skyscraper, the edge line slightly aligned with a perfectly vertical graphic grid. By the time the glass curtain wall installation reached the 60th floor in late 2019, the internal tension within the building's frame was already manifest. Workers on site began filing internal incident notes regarding unusual compression tolerances along the window tracks. The high-performance glass panes, manufactured to withstand intense typhoon winds, were being squeezed by the very concrete frame that was supposed to support them. Then the building opened, the wealthy moved their assets in, and the real-world engineering data collided with reality during the heavy gale storms of late 2021. The automated laser plumb bobs installed in the building's mechanical rooms recorded that the 88th floor penthouse was swaying up to 60 centimeters off-center. While the structure was technically designed to flex without collapsing, the rate of acceleration during that sway was what the engineers missed. The human inner ear can detect even minor lateral acceleration. When a luxury apartment is moving more than half a meter back and forth over a matter of seconds, chandeliers don't just sway. The water in the toilets sloshes out onto the imported marble floors. The structural groaning of the internal drywall framing and the creaking of the high-tensile elevator cables becomes deafening, visual, dramatic reenactment. Graphics showing a luxury interior, unseen tilted slightly. A glass of water on a counter, visibly sloshing repetitively. The developers tried to fix it after the fact by installing a massive tuned mass damper, a multi-hundred-ton steel pendulum suspended near the top floors, designed to sway in the opposite direction of the wind to stabilize the structure. But according to the 46-page structural defect lawsuit filed in April 2025 by the Resident Homeowners Committee, the damper was poorly calibrated to the building's specific micro-fissured concrete harmonics. Instead of silencing the building, the damper created a secondary, low-frequency vibration that hummed through the structural columns of the upper-tier penthouses, making sleep practically impossible. Every of settlement, every accelerated concrete pour, and every calculated shortcut taken to preserve luxury floor area had compounded into a structural nightmare. The engineering files prove that the Jade Emperor Tower isn't suffering from an unpredictable act of God. It is suffering from the predictable math of compromised engineering. Visual map of mainland China popping up on an interactive screen. Red hotspots flash in major ultra-dense megalopolis, the Pearl River Delta, the Yangtze River Delta, and the recently developed northern skyscraper hubs. Drone shots slide rapidly between them. Narrator: what is happening inside the structural frame of the Jade Emperor Tower is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a systemic, nationwide engineering crisis that has been quietly brewing across China's most prestigious megacities for the last 15 years. The era of the hyper-slender residential supertall has transformed the skylines of Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Tianjin into jaw-dropping monuments of architectural ambition. But it has also turned them into a massive, live-action laboratory for unproven high-rise engineering to see where the Jade Emperor Tower is heading. We only have to look across the country to identical structural failures that forced entire towers to go dark. Visual, archival news footage, splash across the screen. Thousands of people running out of a huge tower plaza in Shenzhen. Phone cameras shock violently as the top of a skyscraper apparently wobbles against the sky. Consider the infamous structural panic at the Seg Plaza in Shenzhen. In May 2021, on a completely calm afternoon with no major winds, the 70-story supertall suddenly began to vibrate and shake violently. Thousands of office workers and shoppers fled into the streets of Huaqiangbei in absolute terror. For months, engineers from the China Academy of Building Research scrambled to locate the structural failure. The verdict? A fatal combination of roof-mounted mast antennas catching localized wind frequencies and the shifting thermal expansion of the building's steel and concrete frame. The building had to be completely evacuated and stripped of its crowning structure before it was deemed safe to re-enter. The Seg Plaza was a wake-up call, but the luxury residential sector ignored it. Developers across the nation kept building higher, thinner, and faster, trying to outdo one another with the ultimate safe deposit box in the sky. Now look at the iconic super-tall skyline of Shanghai's Pudong district. Even the world-famous engineering marvels built on the soft mud of the Yangtze River Delta are locked in a perpetual silent war against soil dynamics. During its construction phase, the massive 632-meter Shanghai Tower caused deep anxiety when wide structural cracks began webbing through the surrounding concrete pavement on the ground. Engineers tracked a severe local ground settlement loop caused by the heavy shifting of soil layers under the weight of the surrounding megastructures. While that commercial icon survived thanks to its massive subterranean deep-pile foundation grid, residential supertalls, built on smaller private luxury plots, often lack that extreme level of structural redundancy. Visual, graphic animation comparing the broad base of a commercial tower to the extremely coconut-thin base of an ultra-luxury residential high-rise. The engineering mechanics are brutal. Commercial towers have massive corporate footprints. They can distribute their weight across vast subterranean basements. But an ultra-luxury residential tower like the Jade Emperor is built on a tight premium riverfront footprint where every square meter of land costs a fortune. The building is essentially a vertical concrete spear stuck into soft coastal soil. When you look at the wider landscape of high-rise engineering across China, the pattern of structural fatigue becomes undeniable. In Tianjin, the Golden Finance 117 Tower stands as a harrowing 597-meter reminder of what happens when mega-scale engineering projects run out of momentum and collide with real estate corrections. Left uncompleted, a massive concrete ghost towering over an empty district. In Guangzhou and Wuhan, multiple luxury residential high-rises have recently faced severe occupancy restrictions from local housing bureaus due to defective glass curtain walls. These high-performance glass panes have a documented habit of spontaneously shattering under intense structural compression, raining heavy debris onto the streets below. The structural failure at the Jade Emperor Tower is the direct evolution of these compounding crises. Visual, side-by-side graphics showing in structural, profile comparisons between three major skyscraper, Felcher Arpis in China, Shenzhen Sui, Tianjin Abandonment, and Shanghai Hydrologic Settlement. When a building suffers from the kind of micro-fissuring and foundation settlement we uncovered in the construction files, it triggers a chain reaction across all structural systems. It isn't just that the concrete frame is stiff or that the building sways too much. It means the elevator shafts, the very circulatory system of an 88-story tower, are no longer perfectly straight. A deviation of just a few centimeters over a 300-meter drop means that express elevator cabs traveling at speeds of up to 10 meters per second will scrape against their guide rails. This triggers automated emergency brake sensors, trapping wealthy executives mid-air inside a vibrating dark box. This is why the Chinese real estate market is reacting with such unprecedented hostility to the Jade Emperor Tower. The country's elite are incredibly sophisticated investors. They have watched the rapid build cycles of the last 2 decades. They know that when a building is rushed through its concrete curing phases to beat a macroeconomic deadline, the building eventually tells the truth. The structural issues inside the Jade Emperor Tower aren't a secret anymore. They are written into the property inspection disclosures that every top-tier wealth management fund in Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen has on its desk. The massive 50% price cuts we are seeing on the upper floors are a direct recognition that these apartments are no longer safe haven assets. They are highly volatile liabilities wrapped in an unproven engineering envelope. The super rich aren't just selling because they want to liquidate capital. They are selling because they don't want to be holding the keys when the Municipal Construction Commission decides to issue a mandatory structural evacuation order. Visual, dramatic mood shift, logarithmed on screen, the human costs, individual ledgers, night shots of the tower with lights flickering erratically from only 2 or 3 high-tier residences. The rest of the upper height is absolutely dark. Narrator. Up until now, we have been talking about the Jade Emperor Tower in terms of macro mechanics, slenderness ratios, concrete volumes, and geotechnical settlement loops. But a tower of this scale isn't just an engineering thesis. It is an inhabited structure, or at least it was supposed to be. To truly grasp how deeply the structural rot has infected this 350-meter spear, we have to look at the human cost. We have to examine the personal accounts of the Chinese elites who poured hundreds of millions of yuan into this vertical dream, only to find themselves living out an absolute high-tech horror story. Let's look at the document file behind a name that has sent shockwaves through the luxury real estate boards of Shanghai and Shenzhen, Mr. Lin. Visual. An animated recreation of a property purchase ledger appears on screen, stamped with an infographic emblem of a private wealth logistics surface. Purchase price value FLAS, 280 million thousand. Lin is a prominent logistics and shipping magnate from Zhejiang province. In 2017, looking for a fortress asset to anchor his generational wealth, he purchased a full-floor, 600-square-meter sanctuary on the 72nd floor for 280 million yuan. He spent an additional 40 million yuan customizing the interior, floating marble bathtubs imported from European quarries, seamless smart glass wall panels, and heavy custom-milled teak wood cabinetry anchored directly into the structural concrete core columns. His nightmare began on a Tuesday evening in November 2022, during a late-season coastal gale that swept across the East China Sea, according to affidavits filed by Lin's legal counsel in a structural safety petition to the local housing bureau. The winds hovering at the 70th floor mark were tracking at roughly 75 kilometers per hour. Not even close to typhoon strength, just a standard, aggressive coastal storm. But as the slender profiles of the Jade Emperor Tower began its calculated lateral flex to shed the wind vortices, Lin and his family were awakened by a sound he described as resembling a heavy naval vessel tearing itself apart on a reef. Visual. Animated interior graphic shown. The gap between a concrete in structural column drywall framing separating and closing rhythmically with a metallic harsh squeak sound effect. Because the tower's concrete frame was flexing faster than its interior, finishings could tolerate. The enormous lateral stress was transferring straight into Lin's custom apartments. The custom teak cabinetry began to buckle and split under the compressive load. The structural groaning from inside the utility walls reached an intolerable 85 decibels. But the psychological breaking point came at 2:10 a.m., when a sudden explosive pop echoed from his master bathroom. The structural displacement of the floor slab had put so much shear tension on the plumbing lines that the heavy, high-pressure wastewater pipe running through the utility shaft literally sheared in half. Within minutes, hundreds of liters of pressurized black water broke through the ceiling funnels, flooding his 40 million yuan custom interior. When Lin rushed his family to the elevator lobby to evacuate, they discovered the ultimate vulnerability of life a quarter-mile in the air. The express elevators were completely dead. The building's central monitoring system had detected that the lateral sway of the tower had warped the long steel guide rails within the shaft by more than 4 centimeters out of alignment. To prevent the high-speed elevator cabs from crashing into the shaft walls, the automated safety logic had initiated a hard lockdown, freezing every elevator car in place. Visual. Nighttime simulation footage seen through a cell phone filter looking down an endless, concrete, confined high-rise fire stairwell with flickering emergency lights. Mr. Lin, his elderly mother, and his 2 young children were forced to descend 72 flights of concrete fire stairs in pitch darkness, while the entire building groaned around them like a dying animal. They left behind a ruined apartment, mud-soaked luxury carpets, and an unlivable space. The next morning, Lin checked his family into a luxury hotel on the Bund and instructed his attorneys to file for an immediate emergency asset liquidation. He listed the apartment for 190 million yuan, a straight 90 million yuan loss on the acquisition price alone, completely ignoring the cost of his ruined interiors. He didn't care about the money anymore. He wanted his family off the structural ledger of the Jade Emperor Tower. But Lin's story is a minor incident compared to the structural catastrophe that struck the 60th floor mechanical buffer zone in February 2024. Every 20 floors, the Jade Emperor Tower houses massive double-height mechanical levels that contain the water booster pumps, high-voltage transformers, and trash compaction chutes that service the residential tiers above. Visual. Schematic cross-section diagram of the tower for the 60th floor. Lights up in bright amber. A systemic fascia link lines out from the trash chute and spreads through the water lines because of the severe, unmitigated differential foundation settlement we discussed in Part 2. The 14mm tilt at the base. The vertical trash chute running down the entire height of the building had become slightly bent, creating a high friction pressure point right at the 60th floor junction. On a Friday afternoon, a heavy load of residential waste dropped from the 80th tier penthouses, slammed into this structural kink. The impact didn't just block the chute, it split the heavy steel casing wide open. The kinetic energy released by the bursting chute severed an adjacent 400-volt high-voltage electrical line, triggering an immediate, blinding electrical explosion within the mechanical core. The blast blew out 3 massive exterior glass louvers from the mechanical floor, raining razor-sharp shards of laminated architectural glass down onto the high-end retail plaza below. The falling debris crushed 2 luxury SUVs parked in the drop-off lane and shattered the glass canopy of the main entrance lobby. Total structural property damage on the ground was estimated at over 15 million yuan in a matter of seconds, but the internal damage was far more devastating. The electrical fire knocked out the primary power grid for the top 28 floors of the tower, leaving the multi-million-dollar penthouses without air conditioning, filtration, or water pressure for 4 consecutive days. Visual. Chilling still photographs secured from property management chats showing crest and cracked glass curtain wall pans, strap-tapped by maintenance workers high up on the exposed facade. The developers tried to contain the news, but in the era of social media, structural panic cannot be suppressed by a corporate public relations team. By the time the local fire rescue and housing safety bureaus completed their emergency site assessment, the true state of the tower was laid bare in the property owners' private WeChat groups. The residents realized that their multi-hundred million yuan investments were sitting on top of a volatile engineering matrix that could compromise their basic safety at any moment. The financial damage ledger from that single event is staggering. Gensi facade remediation. 38,000 to temporarily stabilize the compressed glass panels along the core deflection zones. Mechanical core overhaul. 22 million to relocate and rebuild the ruptured trash chute system and re-insulate the electrical lines. Immediate asset value correction. A collective 2.5 billion yuan evaporated from the building's market capitalization as 4 major owners on the upper tiers simultaneously pulled their listings and dumped their units on the private off-market tech network at deep fire sale discounts. This brings us to the ultimate, most damning document in the entire case file, the 2025 litigation ledger. The Homeowners Committee, representing 42 of the primary high-tier resident owners, has launched a massive coordinated fraud and construction defect lawsuit against Chairman Wang's development consortium. The suit demands a mind-boggling 1.8 billion yuan in structural damages and structural rehabilitation funds. The complaint alleges that the developers were explicitly warned by the China Academy of Building Research as early as 2018 that the concrete curing acceleration would lead to premature facade cracking and column shortening, and that the developers actively concealed those engineering memos to prevent a panic that would halt their pre-sales funding loop. Visual. Wang's corporate portrait fades on screen next to an animated seals logo for foreclosure. Red stamp slam down, litigation foreclosure dat. The defendants have issued aggressive blanket denials, calling the tower an architectural triumph of modern domestic engineering, and claiming that all settlement metrics remain within theoretical safety parameters. But the market has already moved past the legal arguments. The rich do not wait for a judge to tell them a building is safe when their toilets are flooding with wastewater and their chandeliers are vibrating from a miscalibrated damper. The ultimate irony? Chairman Wang himself is now facing an internal foreclosure action from his own institutional banking partners on 3 massive luxury units he held inside the tower as personal collateral, when the very man who put his signature on the foundation stone is being squeezed out of his own building by his lenders. The marketing narrative is officially dead. The voyage of the Jade Emperor Tower has transitioned from an era of luxury prestige into a pure, unadulterated scramble for financial survival. Visual. Wide-angle night drone shot of a massive Chinese megalopolis. The Jade Emperor Tower stands in the center, a single beacon of cold white light on its architectural crown, while the residential floor below are a void of blackness. The text on screen reads, "The compounding interest of collapse." Narrator. The financial and structural crisis inside the Jade Emperor Tower is no longer just a localized disaster for 42 traumatized billionaires. It is a terrifying window into the future of an entire architectural asset class across China. For 20 years, the ultra-luxury, super-tall condo was marketed as the ultimate safe haven asset, a vertical vault where global wealth could be locked away, safe from inflation, currency fluctuations, and market corrections. The entire real estate model of billionaires rose from Shanghai's Huangpu riverfront to Shenzhen's Bay District, rested on a single, comforting assumption: that extreme scarcity at the absolute top of the pyramid would protect value no matter what was happening to the economy below. The structural ledger at the Jade Emperor Tower is the first large-scale, real-world test of that assumption with a major engineering defect file attached. And the assumption is failing catastrophically. Visual. Animated financial infographic showing the reverberation effect. A closing price box place, 65.6 million yuan, on the Jade Emperor Tower, and a row shoot outward to neighboring luxury high-rises, causing their valuations to drop critically. Let's translate this structural curse into cold, unforgiving financial mechanics, because this is where the math becomes absolutely relentless. In high-end real estate, there is no such thing as an isolated transaction. Every single discounted, panic-fueled sale that occurs inside the Jade Emperor Tower instantly transforms into a permanent resale comparable. When that 65th floor unit closed at less than half its original asking price, it didn't just hurt that specific seller's bank account. That single closing number was uploaded directly into the property transaction databases accessed by every major wealth management fund, private bank, and independent property appraiser across China now. When any buyer attempts to secure financing for an apartment in any premium residential tower along the waterfront, or when an owner tries to borrow against their luxury high-rise portfolio as corporate collateral, the algorithms pull that distressed data point. Property appraisers do not have feelings. They do not read glossy marketing brochures, and they do not care about hand-carved stone finishes imported from Kyoto. They look at the raw transactional trend. The deep distress at the Jade Emperor Tower acts like a financial black hole, dragging down the asset valuations of every neighboring super-tall skyscraper in its radius. Visual. Camera pans to a formal private bank boardroom in BRIEF reenactment. A LED screen shows risk assessment percentages climbing from green to red. The LTV graph drops steeply, and the institutional lenders are reacting with absolute coldness. Commercial credit risk committees in major banking hubs like Beijing and Shenzhen see the same data files we are reading today. They see a 350-meter concrete needle carrying two massive active lawsuits, totaling more than 2.2 billion yuan in structural remediation and fraud damages, combined with an internal partner foreclosure battle. The immediate result? Risk compliance officers quietly place the tower on an institutional block list. Loan-to-value ratios are slashed from a standard 60% down to 30%. Or lenders decline to write mortgages on high-tier units altogether. This financial freeze completely shrinks the potential buyer pool down to pure cash buyers. And cash buyers in a distressed real estate market are notoriously ruthless. As the transaction ledger on the 72nd and 65th floors has already proved, cash buyers do not negotiate. They dictate terms. They name their own price, stripping away the premium valuation that the developers spent a decade building. Meanwhile, the daily carrying costs of a compromised super-tall structure run in only one direction. Straight-up, visual. Graphic animation of a balance sheet with an escalating expense arrow. Labels pop up. Structural facade monitoring, high-pressure pump maintenance, insurance premium surge. You cannot simply turn off a 350-meter building when it hits financial trouble. The massive automated laser plumb bobs tracking structural flex must be monitored 24/7. The micro-fissured concrete core columns require ongoing ultrasonic scanning to ensure the micro-cracks are not migrating into the structural joints. The high-pressure plumbing risers and miscalibrated tuned mass dampers demand constant engineering maintenance. Because of the documented defect survey and the raining glass incident from the 60th floor, global structural insurance syndicates have reclassified the building as a high-risk asset, causing annual property insurance premiums to triple. Every single one of these ballooning litigation budgets, structural investigations, and operational overhead costs flows directly into the monthly common charges that the property owners must pay out of pocket. The wealthy owners are caught in a classic engineering vice. Their monthly maintenance costs are compounding significantly, while they wait for a cash buyer who may only show up if they offer a 50% fire sale discount. So, let's strip away the marketing, the litigation, and the rumor mills. Is the Jade Emperor Tower actually cursed? Visual. The camera slowly pulls back from a macro view of the Tipoon-grade glass facade out to a stunning, cold profile view of the entire Sleder structure, piercing the waterfront ski. Here is our honest read of the complete engineering and financial file. A curse implies an element of unpredictable bad luck, but nothing in this record is a matter of luck. The violent structural flexing during coastal storms was pure physics, entirely predictable by the extreme 1:15 slenderness ratio. The foundation pile settlement loop was a known risk of building a highly concentrated, massive concrete mass on the soft alluvial soils of a major river delta. The internal microfissuring, according to the homeowner's own court filings, was an engineering consequence that was foreseen and allegedly papered over to preserve a corporate cash flow timeline. The mass exodus of billionaires from China's most expensive residential vertical address isn't a sudden case of collective supersty. Shun. It is the action of highly rational financial actors reading technical engineering documents that the rest of the market chose to ignore. They are paying whatever it costs to leave first, because in a structurally and financially compromised building, the first one out the door always loses the least. The skyscrapers in these investigation files always tell the truth eventually. This one is telling it through its closing prices. A 950 million yuan dream asset becomes a 460 million yuan escape hatch. A 1.2 billion yuan crown penthouse sits completely dark, season after season, a quarter mile in the sky. A mega developer's own apartment keys end up as a default line item in a bank foreclosure archive. The Jade Emperor Tower remains standing, gleaming in the morning sun, still the ultimate postcard profile of a modern, ambitious billionaire's row. It is just that the people who know its structural secrets best keep choosing to view that postcard from somewhere else. The file stays open,